Hello and welcome everyone to Microsoft Ignite 2021. I'd love to welcome you to Introduction to Microsoft Teams Administration and Management. My name is John Gruszczyk. I'm a product marketing manager that works on Microsoft Teams, helping look after anything security, compliance, governance, or privacy related. So today we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the most common tips, tricks, best practices, in getting teams set up and enabled and rolled out to your organization. We do have some awesome experts that will be monitoring the chat and helping respond and post questions. So feel free to get those questions in as they come, and we'll get some of those answered. And then I'll also try and reserve a couple minutes at the end of our session that I can go ahead and answer some questions in real time, and we could have a little bit of an open discussion. So again, my name is John Gruszczyk. I am coming to you live from Seattle, Washington. This is one of our exciting live sessions. Unfortunately, it's not as nice weather as the background of my Teams call right now, but we'll go ahead and get started with the session today. So just a quick agenda. Some things that we're going to cover are some pre-deployment considerations before you get Teams rolled out. And then kind of the nitty-gritty, as I like to say, the deploying and managing Microsoft Teams as you start to scale it throughout your organization. Then we're going to talk about some of those adoption and usage tricks that can help onboard different departments or start to get that critical mass using Teams. We'll share some tips, tricks, and best practices, and then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A and some helpful resources. One quick note, I will be kind of glancing above my camera here to look at my slides, and we'll get into a live demo, but I'll try and primarily look directly into our screen here. All right, so excuse me. Let's hop into it. Pre-deployment considerations and recommendations. This is probably a whole session in itself, but I try to think of how can we cram this into 3 minutes and kind of cover the most important items. And so the first probably sounds very basic, but it is critical. Network optimization and performance for Microsoft 365 services, and especially Teams. So what this means in simple terms is making sure that you have the correct ports and URLs approved and certain items approved from either a firewall settings. We have a whole optimization page and how you can make sure that formerly Office 365, now Microsoft 365, is set up to have full inbound, outbound traffic without having any delay or latency. Because I will say, especially with Teams and in our former Skype for Business days, one of the challenges is if you didn't have these things and you had all sorts of latency starting to be introduced, your live meetings and other things would not have a great experience. So the first thing is really kind of going through those ports, protocols, URLs, and making sure that they're all set up successfully, and then you can start to identify network issues after that. So that's a big first step. It involves a lot of kind of combining different teams, networking, firewall, security, etc. So it's a critical project to take on. So it's a good thing to get started early in your journey of M365. The next is starting to define that Teams rollout and the adoption plan. And so what this is even before you've started to deploy the client out there or get different departments or business groups on Teams, identify who's going to get it first. How are you going to be using Teams? How are you going to start to scale adoption once you've got it rolled out? So the first bullet I have here is to scope your Teams usage scenarios. And this sounds very basic, but it's often a really good tip to start with. How are you going to be using Teams? Are you going to be using it for internal meetings, internal and external? There are organizations that simply start by using Teams just for chat and maybe sharing files. So that's okay. We hope to get you fully on board of using Teams as an entire platform. But it's important to kind of benchmark where you want your Teams journey to start within your organization and what's most feasible. And so once you identify that, you can start to identify what business groups or departments or what that scale plan looks like as you start to roll it out. Accompanying that should be one of the most important things I think you'll find every Microsoftie talk about is that wiki or FAQ or how-to site that really helps scale adoption and helps answer troubleshooting questions and other questions that might prevent end users from actually using the software or applications that you've rolled out. So These are tricky because they usually want to be, kind of directed at some of the most common actions that you're performing or some of the most common challenges that they run into. Of course, it's got to be clear and concise, so all of that mixed together. But these FAQ or kind of wiki sites are extremely useful in helping, organizations, business groups, et cetera, adopt and onboard different technology like Teams that is kind of a substantial change, even from Skype for Business standpoint. Large organizations will actually hire change management experts. That's not uncommon to have, a consulting crew or a professional services company that specializes in change management, maybe in a big cutover from Skype to Teams or even just a full Teams adoption. So that's something we've seen here. And a lot of those assets do get created like job aids and other training that can be used on this how-to site. Then, of course, we want to formulate kind of what that rollout is going to look like. So, pilot, scaled, big bang, this works the same as a lot of other, productivity type applications. Who's going to get it? That kind of goes in with your team's usage scenarios. And then, of course, you want to identify some business champions that can help you kind of define this rollout and scale it and drive adoption. So that's working with different champions based on how your organization is structured, maybe finance, accounting, HR, people that are familiar with the, kind of employees and users, what the usage scenarios look like, so they can help say, hey, we need these type of job aids or training, or these are what some of the roadblockers may be. You kind of get together in a big room, maybe once every other week, et cetera, and kind of discuss what this plan is going to look like. And then from the IT side is this last bucket that we have here on the slide. You need to determine some of the governance decisions for Teams rollout. And these are really kind of up to you as the organization. So Microsoft, we can't really make a whole lot of best practice recommendation here other than what you should be considering. And you'll see these in a lot of our documentation, but it's items like who can create new teams? Is it everyone? Is it these business champions? Or is it, certain people within the organization? It's not always a right or wrong answer based on how your organization works. It's naming conventions. So we see some organizations that are very strict on how you can name teams, maybe in regulated industries, or you have companies like Microsoft that we can create a team with whatever we want to call it. Expiration policies and the hygiene process is very critical when we talk about if you have a full open Teams environment where any of us can create a team. You want to make sure that these teams that aren't being used are expiring. And so we do have some, kind of additional licensing that can help auto expire teams based on a timeline. But in general, we'll walk through this in the Teams Admin Center. It's a good hygiene to walk through as IT or security teams or whoever kind of has that global access to review and make sure the teams that aren't being used are being kind of shut down. And lastly, kind of two combinations here about external collaboration and Teams applications. So again, back to those Teams usage scenarios, what does it look like? Are we going to allow guests? Are we going to allow third-party applications, SaaS apps? You'll start to kind of work with different teams to figure out how you're going to get that within the teams and what that plan looks like. This in itself, again, was a lot of information very quick. So I will kind of pause and just do a quick recap, and that you want to get your environment prepared for Teams, and that means networking and ports and protocols and opening that up. You want to start to scope what your Teams rollout is going to look like before you've even started, get champions on board and other people within the organization that can help prepare training and end user guidance. And then you want to start to determine some of those critical governance decisions to make sure that you can scale Teams smoothly. Again, this is probably an entire session on itself, and we had a lot of great training and material on docs.microsoft.com. But this was a pretty good 4-minute crash course. The next area we want to talk about is deploying Teams across your organization. So the deployment side of this one is a little bit easier, thankfully. We talk about some assessment, again, understanding the hardware requirements that are needed to run Teams. And so with that, you might identify some devices within your organization that maybe aren't up to par, and that those devices you'll plan to use the Teams web app for. So it's a good idea to get that identified. And in line with that, we also talk about what type of virtual desktop infrastructure or VDI environment you may have. How are you going to get the Teams client on there, and how are you going to manage it? Again, those are deep dive topics in themselves. We have a lot of great training materials on them, but there are two big things you're going to want to make sure that you identify, so you know who's getting the desktop app, who's using the web app, and then who will be in that kind of VDI environment. Then, of course, change management plan is a huge, it's kind of a loaded question there or phrase, but it's this idea of, making sure you have the training, the materials, the guidance, the people on staff and support to help with this. So This is another area that you want to kind of have your checks and balances in place before you start a scaled rollout to make sure that you can react and recover for any type of bumps that you may run into. This middle item is probably one of my favorite parts of Teams rollouts or enablements. It's the communication, it's the celebration, it's the evangelization of making people aware that Teams is coming. So if you're joining us from a world of Exchange or SharePoint migrations, this isn't really a whole lot different than when you've migrated mailboxes or changed platforms, whatever it may be. You need to start that education, that training and awareness early as your organization feels comfortable with getting that material out. So it does mean those kind of mass emails, or like I mentioned, the FAQ or wiki sites, little cute, fun training videos. Our best practice here that we're kind of recommending, or I guess I should say John G is recommending, is around T-minus 4 to 6 weeks prior to your begin of your scale of your rollout, is you want to make people aware of it. And part of this is also leadership support behind it, seeing that leaders of the company are going to be on Teams and that they're using it. And also, this might sound a little weird, but making sure that folks understand why you're moving to Teams, how Teams is going to help the organization, and how it's going to help the end user. We found across many different types of migrations, again, back to Exchange with Mail and SharePoint, and even Skype for Business Days, that is an impactful part of a enablement or new service. It's just making sure that end users are seeing the wider adoption from leadership, and then also understanding the vision of the company and why they're using this technology and how it's going to help. And then so continue that communication, that rollout date of when the Teams app will be available. Make sure people are aware that, hey, this is when you could expect to see a Teams app appear on your screen. Or if you're in one of those scenarios where you're actually migrating from Skype for Business or even another third-party service to Teams, you want to be very clear about when those apps are going to disappear, when the new applications will appear, how you can log in, what credentials are used, kind of all that greatness, really kind of giving them that white glove treatment on how to make sure that they're set up for success to start using Teams on day one. Then the last one is, the communication, provide Teams app install availability. So this can come in a lot of different ways that, again, is probably its own session, whether you push it or you make it available to install from a shared site or whatever it may be. Again, just make sure you're communicating, providing very clear instructions to your end users on either how they can, install it and get logged in, or when they can expect to see the app installed, how they can launch it, and again, get logged in. So that leads into this last section of rollout. Again, there's quite a few different ways that you can include it. I came back from System Center days of a lot of app pushes, so you can include it as part of your what I call Office, but the Microsoft 365's apps package. So if you're unfamiliar with that term, that's our traditional PowerPoint, Excel, Word packaging. You could have Teams included in that. Or you could push it as an isolated install through, again, third-party software distribution tooling. You could host it in a share. If you really want to, you could walk around to everyone's PC and plug in a thumb drive. It is a valid install if you really want to do it, but typically we see most organizations, even smaller scale, have some form of automated install. I will make a note here that if you are going to have folks pulling it from either the website or from a shared installation scenario, again, please make sure that you're providing them instructions on how they can walk through and have be set up for success, or else you will start to see that influx of help desk calls, which we want to eliminate. And then lastly, Teams desktop app for VDI, figure out how you're going to handle that, whether web app or desktop apps will be used. We have some great documentation if you're in that scenario for a little bit deeper information on how to get it embedded and all that. Moving on here, so now we're going to talk about managing the Teams lifecycle. And so this is kind of going back to those governance items that I talked about. And the two main buckets I'd like to talk about here before we hop into a demo of our Teams Admin Center is the first is educating and championing new Teams features. So this goes back to that kind of change management of helping people understand how they can use Teams and some of the more critical parts of whatever your usage scenarios will be. Quick note that the desktop app updates automatically behind the scenes, so that's a good thing for desktop or systems admins. Teams app, desktop app typically updates every other week behind the scenes. It looks for an idle state when the end user is not using it, so you don't have to worry about it there. It's actually automated, so it's even more advanced than the traditional Microsoft 365 apps, which do run on a cycle. So you don't have to worry about that. And the web app itself also patches automatically. So the only thing is that IT admins and business champions should be reviewing the admin release notes docs page, which in simple terms, try and understand what features are appearing in the Teams client. So your end users, they might get new features, and of course you don't want them to be spooked out or scared or anything like that. You want them to be able to use the power and creativity of Teams. So being aware when a new feature ships into Teams, something like the 3x3 or kind of grid view or different things like that may be a user experience change. We just want to kind of coach them along and make sure they understand what it is and how to use it. So it is important for not just IT, but kind of those business champions that are helping scale adoption, review those release notes, and then be able to create kind of documentation and training to help scale those features. And then this part is kind of very specific to our Teams admins, but you're going to hop in what's called the Teams Admin Center, and you're going to use this Admin Center to do things like, ensure governance decisions are being followed. You can create and customize global policies, as well as create more granular messaging or meeting policies based on how your organization works, which we'll dive into. And it's also, again, the place that you're going to follow up on your hygiene practices. So things like external collaboration, team expiration, seeing if guests are in a team that they shouldn't be, managing what type of apps are available, all that greatness. So if you are going to be a Teams admin and you're watching this session because you are really have no idea where to start with Teams, but you know that you're going to be involved with it, one of the best things to do is hop on docs.microsoft.com, check out some of the standard Teams Admin Center training and documentation. We have a lot of great photos and kind of details about what things are. And then you can hop over to Microsoft Learn, which I'll link at the end, and kind of walk through some kind of curated guidance on what it is. And so now, instead of looking at slides, I do want to hop into a quick demo here. So I'm going to switch screens briefly, if you give me 1 second. And I will have my Microsoft Teams Admin Center pull up. And as it pulls up here, you will see that this is kind of the main home landing page. And you'll see in this top left-hand corner, we have the Teams Admin Center. And again, if you're not familiar with it, this is where you are going to manage most of your team-specific related components. And so the reason why I say that is security, compliance, and some of those other capabilities across Microsoft 365 do get managed in a centralized admin tenant, or maybe the security one. But in this realm, and we're talking Teams admin and management, you're going to live and breathe here in the Teams Admin Center. And so one of my favorite things, and when we talk about hygiene and best practice to start in, is this Manage Teams page right here. And the reason why I feel that this is so important is you get a great view of all of the teams in your organization and some really important things that you as IT admins and even acting on behalf of security teams can take a look at. So one of the first ones I like to see is, how many private channels are related in that team. And for those of you that might not be familiar with private channels, they are a way to kind of isolate a channel within Teams to restrict access. So maybe we have a general team that includes all of our marketing department, but we have a top secret marketing project that really needs to limit who's allowed to see those type of resources and doesn't include the wider marketing group. We can create a private channel that limits access and kind of restricts and safeguards content to only those need to know basis. And so that's why it's a good idea to see any teams that might have a mass amount of private channels that you weren't expecting. Of course, we have our easy to view here team members. So this is just an idea of when we talk about following up on teams that need to maybe be expired or retired, we can see these ones that have team members with very low population. From an ownership standpoint, we can see here just how many owners are in there. So again, if a team only has one owner, it's typically that team is not being heavily used. And then back to a security cap right now, guests. This is probably my biggest one and most important view right here. This is, for me, looks great. I don't have guests in my organization. If you as an organization also are the same, this would be a great way to see if any guests have gotten in. And so guests are members of outside organizations that are brought in. They do have access to your some of your organizational resources. So again, this is just a great way to have a very quick look and see if there are any guests of teams that don't look right. Maybe this is I'll just use an example. I should know that my US sales team is strictly internal employees only. If there were guests in that team, I would be a little alarmed and go ahead and dive in there and see what's going on. So again, we have a privacy standpoint, whether the team is public for everyone to join, including guests, or whether it's private and invitation is needed only, and a couple other items. And so from a Teams 101 admin and management, I think this is probably my favorite place to get the best overview of everything. From there, this session would start to dive a little bit deeper, but I'll give some very quick high-level items. We'd go into things like meeting policies. And so what meeting policies are the ability to actually create more granular meeting policies for different departments or business groups, or maybe user level. So like our executives, or an instance or an example I like to always use is my legal team might actually need to have very different meetings than my general audience. And what I mean by that is maybe my legal team works with a lot of partners and other external members, but we trust our legal team to be able to have, open-ended meetings, whereas our general user base, we might want to restrict things like guests being automatically joined, or how we want to direct them to a lobby or other areas like that. So at a high level, this is, allowing you as the IT admins to work with your organization and understand if different business groups, departments, end user levels need to have slightly more or more restrictive or less restrictive meeting types. And the same thing works for, varying things across teams. So things like messaging policies, the apps that are available. Again, this is a one-on-one session, so we won't dive into all of that. But the takeaway from this is your chance that you can not only understand what's going on in your team's organization, but start to customize and granularize kind of your team's environment based on how your organization is using Teams. And so the last thing that I'll hop over to, and then we'll get back into the demo, is just some of the usage reporting. And you see here that I am actually not going to have a whole lot of things in here because this is a demo tenant. So I'll run a report for the last 30 days, and I'll switch back over to the slide view. But I just wanted to show you when we talk about reporting and analytics that we can start to monitor the adoption and the usage of Teams. This is kind of going to be your central place too. So not only are you using it to manage and kind of administer Teams, but you're also going to be using it to monitor your progress and the adoption that's going on. So do want to quickly hop back and kind of close out our session here because we're running a little bit low on time. So I will hop back over here. And so when we talk about the admin reporting, there are two really important areas that I quickly glossed over in that view, but we want to look at our service health and our service usage. And our service health is going to be kind of that core operational efficiency, and we can use something called the call quality dashboard to be able to monitor that. So, basic, organizational-wide trends, again, back to that network optimization. And then we have something within that called call analytics that can actually look at individual end users. So if you're getting a single end user or, base that is reporting common issues, we can actually look at that individual end user, obviously obfuscating, privacy-related data, but we can actually analyze maybe what's going on there. And then from a service usage standpoint, these are going to, again, help you understand what people are using. So are they using channels? Are they using messaging? You can start to understand where you need to maybe build some additional training or communication. A lot of great reports there, which I believe I have on this next page. We have the call quality dashboard on the left-hand side here. So very scary looking chart if you haven't hopped into it yet, but it's very, very good. We have a great docs article on this as well. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, we have an image of call analytics. So again, this would be a specific end user that keeps saying, hey, I'm latent when I see slide changes or whatever it may be. We can actually go and work directly with that end user and start to identify maybe what's going on there. Call analytics can be especially helpful in this hybrid work and remote world where not everyone might be on campus anymore or working from an on-premises location that has a corporate network set up. So this can be a good chance to work with your end users that might not be on premises and having some Teams issues that's affecting their relationship with the product or the software. We can help them have a better experience. And so I'd like to hop over to our last kind of tips, tricks, best practices, and I'll show some helpful resources, and then we'll have about 5 minutes left for some time. I have, if you're not familiar with the image on here, that is Stephen Rose, who hosts an awesome webinar and podcast series on around training adoption. So he shared two of his favorite tips on here that I'll get to. But the first is very kind of non-101 related, but limit your hops. And what I mean, or sorry, I'll backtrack. Limit your hops and QoS, or quality of service, your team's traffic. And what that means is going back to that network optimization. Teams is very resource intensive. It's network intensive. You're video sharing, you're sharing files, you're collaborating in things on real time. So what you really want to do is reduce any sort of latency opportunity. And so go through that setup and make sure your network is optimized for Microsoft 365 across all services. Then you can start to kind of hone in on what might be some minor problems. Second one, and I would argue is probably the most important from an adoption standpoint, which Stephen backs, is that, Wiki FAQ change management site. So if you're a smaller organization or even a larger organization that doesn't typically bring on change management teams, that's okay. We have a lot of great resources within Microsoft on the tech community. Reach out to folks like myself and Stephen. We can help give you some advice and some resources that we see used, but these go a monumental way in helping drive that adoption of teams across your organization. Selfishly, I added this third one here, extend your Microsoft 365 security and compliance capabilities. And what I mean by that is, if you're using something like data loss prevention or sensitivity labels for mail with Exchange and SharePoint files, most cases, it's a checkbox for Teams. Go into the service, edit it, and apply that checkbox to Teams. Of course, do your testing and make sure everything's set up correctly. But a lot of the capabilities that are a part of Teams come from Microsoft 365, and that's the strength and power of it. So it's really easy to actually integrate them in. So make sure you're taking advantage. For those of you that know Stephen, he did come from the SharePoint OneDrive world. So I do agree with this tip through the OneDrive redirect, which again sounds like an advanced term, but it's an easy way to start to get people's files stored in OneDrive and in SharePoint. So again, we can manage them easier and have deeper integration within Teams. So it does help collaboration, make it easier so we can share cloud attachments versus those kind of on-prem attachments or regular base. So this is kind of its own step, but it actually does help drive that Teams adoption. The last two I'll kind of quickly cover. Create that external collaboration hygiene process. And so this is a topic in itself that most times we spend with customers talking an entire day on. How are you going to work with outside organizations? It's things like federating with other tenants, which means it's kind of a sister relationship. Are you going to allow outside guests? Are you using, AAD, federated with other organizations? Again, deep topics there, but just make sure you understand how you're going to collaborate outside the organization, because that is a core part of everyday collaboration and something that Teams offers. And then my last tip that I think everyone probably understands and resonates with, one size does not fit all. That's why we don't make the most common best practice recommendations for how to adopt Teams, because every organization is using Teams slightly differently. Even, same customer size in the same industry, doing the same type of service work or whatever it may be, will find different ways to use Teams and how it fits their organization. So again, please reach out to us as I jump to this next slide. On the tech community, that's a place you'll find a lot of us experts hopping around on. Look at the content on Learn and docs.microsoft.com, but ask questions. Go on the tech community and interact with our MVPs like Chris Ward, who's a part of this, who's sharing, hey, this is how we've seen other organizations adopt and scale. So the one size fits all is to make you understand that you're not alone. It is a difficult journey to get big services like this enabled across the organization, but there's a lot of people invested, not just within Microsoft, but across our MVP community, the tech community, that are here to help you adopt and scale Microsoft Teams. So that was a lot of information. I talk fast. I know I do. I apologize for that, but I do want to leave a couple minutes here for some questions. So I'm going to shift over here to take a look at the live event questions. I'll leave this slide up here for where we can go to learn more. And let me take a look at some of the questions that we see getting posted. I do see, Amy, I can answer this one really quick. What is OneDrive redirect? It is the ability to have any documents stored on the computer desktop or documents, music, or pictures folder to automatically be stored in OneDrive. So it is kind of a governance path that will help make sure files are being stored in OneDrive and in SharePoint and not on the actual desktop or the computer itself. There's a lot of questions, so maybe what I'll do is, Chris Horde, if you're able to come off mute, maybe there's a couple questions that stood out or something. You're an admin and management expert yourself, so I'd love to hear some common questions.
Hey, John, we've got a few here that I'll go through. The first one is, how do you enable, I mean, the administrator has asked about the public preview program. How do we actually get our users into public preview? How do we light them up so that they can take advantage of all of those great new features coming down the pipe?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish I was able to show it off, but we do have the ability within the tenant and Teams Admin Center, and this extends across other Microsoft 365 services as well, to opt into the public preview program. So Chris, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I know you work with this a lot, but it's a fairly easy process that you as the admin can do yourself inside of your tenant.
That's awesome. No, I mean that's really great. The second question is, in terms of administration, we know that we can use the Teams Admin Center. We can also use PowerShell. Is there kind of a good example for both, and is it best to use both as a Teams administrator?
Oh, that is a really good question. You almost caught me off guard with that one. I will say I was a PowerShell guru for a long time, so I tend to default to using PowerShell because once I get going, I feel more comfortable using commandlets. So I would say my first answer would be, if you're not a PowerShell expert, understand where you could do things in the Teams Admin Center and be okay and feel comfortable doing it there. If you're someone that did come from a coding world and feel a lot more comfortable using PowerShell, I think it's totally fair to do as many things in there as you can. I would just say personally too, I like a UI, so I do find myself using more and more of the Teams Admin Center just to see a more visual approach than PowerShell. But again, I think a little bit sits with how you like to work it as an individual, but personally, I found myself more and more heading over to the Admin Center just to get a nice UI and visually see things.
There's another nice question here as well in terms of about the management of apps, and we have an admin that's asking that he doesn't want some of his users to be able to use certain apps. So how does he go about stopping that and implementing it within his organization?
Yes, that's a fantastic question, and something that I glossed over fairly quickly, but it's a very core part of Teams. Is of course, Teams is an app that also allows other apps to be integrated in and outside of Microsoft as well, third party. So that is a very core part of scaling Teams as a platform. And so what admins can do is they can actually go into the Admin Center and you can block certain applications. And we've started to really introduce more granular level management and policies to this based on customer and expert feedback, including folks like Chris from the MVP world, on how to kind of make this a better experience. So something I can share that we're working through right now that we announced as part of Ignite is the old experience is if you were blocked from an application as an end user, that app wouldn't actually appear to you in the Teams store. That's something that we've received feedback on that should be altered and changed. And so the way that we're actually kind of going forward with this now is if me as an end user have been blocked from accessing an app, I can now see it, but I can request to my IT admin to download that app. So we still have the safety that not anyone can just go and download a blocked app, but they're now able to go and request it. And the hopes kind of and the feedback that we got around that was IT can now see that folks that are requesting more commonly used applications, and it kind of doesn't limit productivity. So to circle back, the first part of to answer your original question, Chris, is yes, you can block apps within the Teams Admin Center. But the thing I'm excited about is really kind of making some improvements here to make it easier for end users to discover applications, from a productivity standpoint, but IT still have the management and security controls to know that not any app can be installed.
That's awesome. That is a great response. Got one more here in terms of an admin who's asking that he's hearing the word group policy used in the context of Teams, and just wanted to clarify that because he says he's been in IT a long time and group policy means a certain thing to him, but this is used in the context of managing apps.
Yeah, and I think this is actually an aha moment for me because I should have started off the session with this. It's just some of the relationship of how teams work. So you'll hear us kind of talk about group assignment or group, maybe even policy. What we're referring to when it comes in the Teams world is something called a Microsoft 365 group, formerly known as Office 365 group. But what M365 groups are really kind of a modern security or distribution group that is a collection of folks. And so that Teams actually pivots off that group membership. You can create them like a DL. They can be populated with different kind of folks across the organization. But that is something I should have led with. Thank you, Chris. An M365 group is that identity or that membership category. And then, of course, from a SharePoint standpoint, Teams is built off of SharePoint for files.
That's absolutely brilliant. One of the exciting things that we've seen is in terms of the management of devices. And we've got a question here about what configuration profiles are for within the Teams Admin Center. What is the point of that?
Oh, that's a good one. I'll throw this back to you, Chris, because this isn't something I fully prepped on. So I'd love to give your.
Hey, that's no problem. Configuration profiles are all about setting standardized profiles on the devices. So say, for example, that we want them to authenticate in a certain way or to basically behave in a certain way. We can set the configuration profiles down upon Teams phones or other things such as the MTRs in order to make them kind of act in the same way. And from an admin perspective, it makes our lives a whole lot easier. If we know that every phone or every MTR within inside our organization is going to be configured in exactly the same way, it just makes it very easy from an administration perspective, like a template.
Awesome. Chris, I'll ask you one very quick question and then I'll wrap things up. What is your go-to resource to learn more about Teams, administration, management? You only get one, though.
Hey, I'm going to be old school and say that the Microsoft tech community, because I'm in there solving problems and I learn as I help other people solve their problems out. As I'm a trainer in my day-to-day life, but at the same time, I like keeping my hands in on the coal face and solving people's problems. And for me, helping them work it out makes me learn, and keeps me sharp.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And I will echo that, aka.ms/Teams blog. You will see me publishing about once a month on there, and then you will have all types of experts answering questions. So this session did run over, so I hope you were able to get to your other sessions. And I just want to give you a very heartfelt thank you for attending. Please find us on the tech community and continue asking us questions and reaching out. We hope to hear more and hope you have a wonderful rest of your Microsoft Ignite 2021. Thank you again. Have a good rest of your day.